My family has a little cabin tucked away in the high country, a place where my parents spent many winters carving down powdery slopes and sharing memories on snowy afternoons. The cabin, a relic that's been in our family for decades, exudes an old-world charm despite its creaks and worn paint. My dad always joked that its weathered appearance was part of its character, though he had mentioned more than once that it might be time for a modern upgrade. For me, though, it was a magical world of adventure, a place where every snowfall painted a canvas for childhood mischief. One bitterly cold winter when I was 8, my older brother, Alex, and I found ourselves caught in one of the fiercest storms the mountains could conjure. We had been eagerly anticipating the first great snowfall, a promise of endless white fields and secret hideouts. The day arrived with the sky draped in heavy, ominous clouds and the wind whispering warnings as it howled across the pines. Despite the chill, we were determined to create our own legend that day, a daring game of capture and stealth that we called the Hunt for the Hidden Relic. The rules were simple: each of us would build a small fort somewhere on the sprawling, snow-blanketed property, and then, after a secret signal, we'd try to sneak into each other's fort to retrieve the prized relic, a perfectly round, carefully crafted snowball that we insisted held magical powers. Alex, always the bold one, chose a spot near the edge of a dense grove of evergreens, while I opted for a more secluded nook close to the winding driveway that led to our neighbor's property. There was something exhilarating about the freedom the cabin's vast surroundings offered, a promise that our little world was full of hidden mysteries waiting to be uncovered. As the game began, I trudged through the unplowed snow along the familiar driveway, each step muffled by the thick blanket covering the ground. The swirling snow and biting wind made every moment feel like a scene from a ghost story. I reached the border of the neighbor's property, where a stately house stood silent and imposing against the storm. I knew we'd often dare each other to venture close, always with a mix of thrill and caution. But today, I was determined to secure the relic for my fort before Alex had a chance to claim victory. I crept along the side of the house, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of movement. The snow had erased many familiar landmarks, and the swirling flakes blurred the outlines of trees and fences. Just as I began to feel a surge of triumph at the thought of outsmarting my brother, I heard a soft, almost melodic voice call out, "Are you searching for someone?" I froze in my tracks. The voice seemed to come from inside the house, and as I peered through a frost-kissed window, I saw a figure standing there, a woman with kind eyes that did little to quell the sudden chill that ran down my spine. She beckoned me inside, her smile warm yet strangely out of place amidst the harsh winter. "Come in, dear, you'll catch your death out there," she said in a gentle tone. But something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling that her welcoming expression was a mask hiding secrets I wasn't meant to know. Glancing back towards the direction where Alex had set up his fort, I noticed a set of footprints that abruptly ended at the doorstep, as if someone had hurriedly retreated into the labyrinth of snowy shadows. My heart pounded as I edged closer to the door, every instinct urging me to run back to the safety of our cabin. I tried calling out for Alex, but only the howl of the wind responded. Suddenly, a creak sounded from above, the unmistakable sound of someone moving inside the house. Panic surged through me as I realized that I might not be the only one drawn to the mystery of this silent abode. I turned to flee, but the door had swung shut behind me, trapping me in a moment of paralyzing uncertainty. In that instant, the comforting world of childhood games dissolved into something much more sinister. I could hear heavy footsteps echoing down the stairs, a slow and deliberate cadence that resonated with an eerie finality. The voice from above shifted, mutating from gentle to commanding, as if ordering someone, or something, to come closer. I scrambled back toward the window, desperate for any sign of escape or a glimpse of Alex, but the figure at the window had vanished into the swirling snow. I bolted out the door, leaving behind me unanswered questions and the lingering scent of stale winter air. The storm outside was relentless, and as I raced along the familiar driveway, the wind seemed to carry a chorus of whispered warnings. It wasn't until I finally reached our cabin that I found solace in the sight of Alex and Dad waiting anxiously by the door, their faces etched with concern. Between rapid breaths, I recounted what had happened, the mysterious invitation, the eerie voice, and the figure that had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Alex nodded solemnly, confessing that he too had felt an inexplicable pull toward the neighbor's house earlier, only to retreat when he noticed a shadow flickering in one of the upper windows. Our dad wasted no time. He insisted on checking the house, his protective instincts overriding any rational explanation. Armed with a flashlight and a firm resolve, he ventured toward the enigmatic dwelling, while we watched from the safety of the cabin, our hearts still pounding in unison. After what felt like an eternity, Dad returned with news that left us all with a chill deeper than the winter air. The house had been abandoned for years, a relic of a bygone era, and no one had lived there for a long time. The strange footprints, the soft invitation, and the mysterious figure were never explained. In the days that followed, our family packed up our cherished relics from the cabin, a precaution born of that one terrifying encounter. Even now, whenever winter wraps the mountains in its icy embrace, I remember that day with a mixture of wonder and dread. The cabin remains a repository of memories, both joyful and haunting, a testament to the thin line between childhood adventure and the unexplained mysteries that sometimes lurk in the shadows of a snowy night. I've been skiing for as long as I can remember, and our family's mountain retreat has always been the heart of our winter adventures. My parents, both fierce competitors in their youth, met on the slopes and dedicated their lives to the sport. They made sure that my siblings and I learned to ski as soon as we could walk, so it was inevitable that my college years would be filled with my own unforgettable mountain memories. During my senior year, my friends and I planned a trip to Vermont, arguably the crown jewel of northeastern skiing. We arrived at a vast resort famed for its labyrinth of trails and 7 towering ski lifts that connected peaks and valleys like a living puzzle. The excitement in the crisp morning air was palpable. We were young, full of energy, and ready to challenge ourselves on double black diamond runs that demanded every ounce of our skill. Our first day on the slopes was pure exhilaration. We sliced through fresh powder, our laughter echoing against the mountain's ancient face as we carved turns and pushed our limits. The adrenaline of high-speed descents and daring jumps was intoxicating, and as dusk approached, we gathered at the top of a lift to catch our breath and share stories of our day's exploits. That's when we first saw them. Standing apart from the throng near the lift were 2 striking young women, one with flowing dark hair and the other with sunlit blonde locks. Not wearing helmets, they exuded a relaxed confidence that both intrigued and disarmed us. They introduced themselves as Mia and Lexi, and soon we learned that they were escaping the relentless pace of city life for the serenity of the mountain. Their charm was effortless, and their eyes sparkled with secrets as they casually mentioned a hidden trail known only to a few locals. Mia leaned in and spoke in a low, conspiratorial tone about Phantom's Run, a narrow, treacherous glade winding deep into an ancient stand of pines far from the well-traveled pistes. Lexi added that the trail was as exhilarating as it was dangerous, a place where the mountains seemed to whisper forgotten legends. Our youthful curiosity, mixed with the promise of an adventure that transcended the ordinary, was impossible to resist. Despite the fading daylight, we agreed to follow them once the lifts closed. Under the cloak of twilight, we reconvened at a secluded spot near the base of the resort. The path Mia and Lexi pointed to led us away from the glittering resort into a dense forest where fresh snow muffled every sound. As we trudged forward, the familiar chatter of other skiers dwindled until it was replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in from every side. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were venturing into a realm where nature guarded its darkest secrets. After a brisk walk through this hushed wonderland, we reached the entrance to Phantom's Run. The trail was barely wide enough for our skis, flanked by towering, snow-laden trees that bent slightly in the chill wind. Mia and Lexi's smiles were warm but carried an undercurrent of mystery, as if they knew more than they were letting on. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I hesitated at the threshold between familiar joy and the unknown. As we began our descent into the glade, the path twisted unpredictably among gnarled pines and hidden depressions. The deeper we went, the more the trail seemed to come alive with subtle, almost imperceptible movements in the periphery, shadows that darted behind trees, the crunch of snow that didn't match our own footsteps. The thrill of the challenge blended with a growing sense of dread, and I couldn't help but wonder if Phantom's Run was more than just a forgotten trail. Before long, we reached a small clearing where the snow lay undisturbed, and something caught my eye, a pair of old, battered skis half buried in the pristine powder. They were out of place, relics of a bygone era, and Mia's eyes lit up as she explained that these skis belonged to a local legend, a skier who had vanished on Phantom's Run years ago. The tale was one whispered among seasoned locals, and in that moment, the wind seemed to carry a mournful echo through the trees. Suddenly, a wave of inexplicable fatigue washed over me. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the cold or the adrenaline, but the feeling only deepened. One by one, my friends began to stagger, their eyes glazing over as if caught in a trance. Mia and Lexi exchanged glances, no longer the playful smirks from earlier, but expressions of quiet satisfaction. Panic surged through me as I realized that our decision to follow them might have been a grave mistake. Clutching my skis tightly, I fought to remain alert. I called out to my friends, urging them to shake off the daze that had overtaken them. Their unresponsive forms, slumped against the immaculate white, sent chills racing down my spine. It was in that moment I realized we'd been lured into a trap, a carefully orchestrated scheme that exploited our trust and our hunger for adventure. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard a faint rustling in the trees. I turned sharply to see a tall, shadowy figure emerging from the gloom. The figure was draped in a long, dark coat and a hat pulled low over their face, leaving only a pair of piercing eyes visible. The presence of this stranger sent a jolt of terror through me. I wanted to run, but my body felt rooted to the spot, every muscle frozen in fear. The mysterious figure paused a few paces away and then, as silently as it had appeared, melted back into the dense forest. The encounter left me trembling with a mixture of dread and a desperate urge to escape. With my heart pounding in my ears, I forced myself to move. I dragged my semi-conscious friends along the winding trail, retracing our steps with frantic urgency. Every crunch of snow underfoot was a stark reminder of the peril we were in. Time seemed to blur as the forest grew darker and the temperature dropped further. The path wound on like a maze, each turn deepening my anxiety. I could barely hear my ragged breaths over the whispering wind and my own racing thoughts. Then, in the distance, I spotted a narrow glimmer of light, a sign of civilization. Hope surged within me as I pushed forward, clinging to the thought of a ski lodge or service station that might offer safety. When I finally burst through the door of a small, warmly lit lodge, I was a bundle of frantic energy and relief. The staff, startled by my disheveled appearance, quickly called for help. As I sat in the lobby, shivering and exhausted, I replayed the night's harrowing events over and over in my mind. Had we been drugged? Or was there a more sinister force at play, a calculated trap set by someone who knew the mountain's darkest secrets? In the days that followed, the incident was investigated, but the bizarre circumstances left the authorities with little evidence. The police were perplexed, and the local news barely scratched the surface of what had happened on Phantom's Run. My friends eventually recovered, though none of us could fully explain the fog that had descended upon us that night. Officially, the incident was chalked up to a case of mass intoxication. But deep down, I knew that something far more disturbing had occurred, a shadowy presence that thrived on the unwary curiosity of those who dared seek adventure in the heart of the mountains. Even now, whenever I return to the slopes, a part of me remains haunted by that night. The mountain is a realm of beauty and peril, where every turn holds the promise of joy and the threat of the unknown. The allure of the snowy peaks is undeniable, but it carries a silent warning. Nature's majesty is intertwined with its mysteries, and sometimes, those mysteries are best left undisturbed. As I watch the snowfall from the safety of my home, I can still feel that lingering unease, a reminder of Phantom's Run, a tale of trust betrayed and the unfathomable forces that lurk in the winter wilderness. The mountain remains an eternal enigma, a place where legends are born and where the line between adventure and nightmare blurs in the cold embrace of winter. Every winter, my friends and I share a quiet ritual, venturing out onto a remote frozen lake under the light of a full moon. It's not an elaborate adventure, just the three of us, bundled up against the biting cold, enjoying the eerie tranquility of the ice. There's something almost magical about that desolate landscape, where the soft crunch of our footsteps and the distant whisper of the wind create a world apart from everyday life. This past winter, we decided to embrace the silence once again. We drove out to a small town a few miles from home and parked near a sparse stand of trees that shielded the lake's edge. The night was unusually heavy with snow, and the moon hung low and luminous in a sky that promised both wonder and a hint of danger. I wasn't one for risk, but with my two closest friends, Mark and Ethan, by my side, I felt invincible, ready to face whatever the night might bring. After a short drive on an empty road, we finally reached the frozen lake. The surface was an immaculate sheet of ice, its reflective quality blending the edges of night and day into something surreal. We made our way slowly onto the ice, our laughter echoing in the stillness, sharing stories and marveling at how the landscape seemed to come alive with each step. As we ventured deeper, far from the comfort of the shore, an unsettling sensation began to creep in. The further we moved away from the trees, the more isolated we felt, as if the lake itself was watching us. We paused for a moment to take in the vast, silent expanse when suddenly, something on the far side of the lake caught our attention. At first, it appeared as a dark, hulking shape moving slowly along the edge where the trees met the ice. We exchanged nervous glances and fell silent, our playful banter replaced by an unspoken dread. The figure moved with an odd, shuffling gait that was neither completely human nor entirely animal. It was as if nature had conspired to blur the lines between the two. Our hearts pounded as we watched the figure draw nearer. The closer it came, the more its features became apparent, a person, strangely contorted in a bulky, ill-fitting bare suit. The sight was bizarre, as if someone had donned a costume for a prank, but the way the figure moved was anything but playful. It dragged something behind it, a small, dark bag that swung back and forth with each step, the sound of its scraping echoing unnervingly on the ice. Mark, usually the most daring of us, whispered, "Is that really a bear?" His voice trembled with both disbelief and fear. We stood rooted to the spot, unable to tear our eyes away from the unsettling scene unfolding before us. The figure came to a halt, bent down as if inspecting the bag, then resumed its slow, deliberate march toward us. Every instinct urged us to run, yet we couldn't bring ourselves to move. After what felt like an eternity, the figure finally paused near a patch of thinner ice. I could see the outline of a zipper being unfastened along the side of the costume. In that chilling moment, the illusion shattered. The bulky bare suit slid off to reveal a man whose face was as ordinary as it was haunting, his expression void of emotion, his eyes distant and unseeing. Before any of us could react, the man leaned forward and began banging a small rock repeatedly against the ice. Each impact sent sharp, resonant cracks through the frozen surface, as though he were trying to force something out from beneath. The sound was mechanical, almost deliberate, and it filled the silence with an ominous rhythm that made our skin crawl. Ethan's hand shot out, gripping my arm as he murmured, "We need to get out of here." With our hearts racing and thoughts muddled by fear, we instinctively backed away, carefully retracing our steps on the ice. Every crack of our footsteps seemed deafening in the still night, a stark reminder of how exposed we were in that vast, icy wilderness. We made it back to the tree line, where the safety of shadow and distance provided a fragile sense of protection. Without a word, we piled into the car and sped away into the darkness, our minds replaying the surreal encounter over and over. None of us could quite shake the feeling that we'd witnessed something inexplicable, something that defied simple explanation. In the days that followed, we debated what we had seen. Had it been a twisted prank? A disturbed local trying to scare off trespassers? Or something far more sinister, an act meant to send a message? I couldn't be sure, but the image of that man in the bare suit, methodically breaking the ice with a rock, haunted my every thought. I later learned that around the same time, a missing persons report had surfaced in a nearby town, a young individual who vanished under mysterious circumstances. The timelines eerily overlapped, and though it was probably just an unsettling coincidence, I couldn't help but wonder if our encounter was connected to something darker, something that lurked beneath the surface of that frozen lake. Every winter now, as I glance at the quiet stretch of ice in my memories, I feel a chill that goes beyond the cold. That night taught me that even in the serene beauty of nature, there are secrets that are best left undiscovered, mysteries that remind us of our vulnerability in the face of the unknown.